First of all, just good evening to everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming. We are just thrilled to have our panel today, to have this discussion about such an important topic and important work that we're doing. We're thrilled that all of you are here. I think we have close to 150, probably more will be coming in the next few minutes. So this is a big number for us on Zoom. So hopefully there are no technical issues, but if there are, please bear with us. And we will do our best to sort things out. We have multiple people monitoring the chat and a lot going on. So I think with a little bit of patience and a lot of, I think, excited energy, we will have a wonderful next 2 hours. So let me get started. Again, I'm Eric Haas. I'm the director of the doctoral program. And along with Mari Gray and Katie Strom, two faculty members in our Department of Ed Leadership, we've organized this work so far. And this is part of now the third year of our Radical Educator Speaker Series. So in 2017-18, we had these three speakers, and it was a wonderful start to this process. And then the next one was in 2019-20, last year, and we had these three. And Dr. Farima Pour-Khorshid was here last year, and she was amazing. And we invited her back this year as well. And the key to this is, as the title says, this is to look at radical, frame-breaking, transformative looks at education. And with that in mind, we've changed the format a little bit this year, and we're having one particular focus, and that is the idea of abolition and abolition leadership. What does it mean? What does abolitionist leadership mean for all of us? What does that mean for our work as educators, for us as a department of educational leadership within the whole East Bay and even nationally? And so what we're going to do, we have a work group that parallels, and you'll hear a little bit more about that in a moment. And we have these three speakers today who Dr. Gray will introduce in a moment. And we're going to have a dialogue related to that. And that dialogue, whoops, Dr. Strom, can you stay on that last one for 1 second? There we go. And that dialogue will continue next month with two more speakers. And then it will conclude, at least at a new plateau in March, where one of our panelists today, Dr. Crystal Laura, will return. So we have an ongoing event. We're going to be in dialogue with our working group, with all of you, and with our panelists throughout the next 3 months to look at what does abolitionist leadership mean? How do we put it into practice? What does it mean for all of us as a department and community? So with that, we'll move on to our panelists today. And I will turn it over to Dr. Gray.
Thank you. This speaker series was developed in the midst of what Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings describes as multiple pandemics, a fight for environmental justice, a national health crisis that disproportionately affects Black, Latinx, and Indigenous communities, along with the poor, who we are now calling essential workers, an economic crisis initiated by the exploitation of our nation's most vulnerable people, an economic crisis, and a history of systemic racism that is embedded throughout every national institution, and in particular, the criminal justice and educational systems. As an educational leader who researches and has written about student discipline, adult decision-making, and policing in schools, and a faculty member who prepares the region's educational leaders I am especially grateful for today's focus on abolitionist leadership. I am comforted by the fact that we are not only speaking the names of unarmed Black people murdered at the hands of police, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Rayshard Brooks, Daniel Prude, Vincent Belmont, Andre Hill, Casey Goodson, Jonathan Price, Dijon Kizzee, Carlos Carlson, David McAtee, Tony the Tiger McDade, and acknowledging the Black and brown boys and girls in schools who have been disproportionately removed from educational opportunity through practices like detention, suspension, expulsion, arrest, what my good friend Benjamin Blaisdell calls redlining in the classroom, and tracking. We are also actively engaged in equipping the leaders of our program, the region, and our state to abolish the inhumane and unjust treatment of Black, Indigenous, Latinx, poor, immigrant, disabled, LGBTQIA, and other vulnerable communities in schooling. We are preparing educational leaders to center the kind of radical love for Black and brown students that results in our freedom, joy, health, wellness, prosperity, and peace. At CSU East Bay, we have a stance, and every day we recommit to living into it. Next slide. We believe that powerful change happens when people develop collective agency, just back one, there we go, and efficacy to disrupt historical injustices and create more equitable learning communities. We commit to collectively stand in solidarity with our students to build connected communities that lead to the transformation of oppressive systems and practices within our educational context. Because of this commitment, we knew that we didn't want our speaker series to be another sit and get. And if we have learned anything from this pandemic, it is the importance of community. We knew that we wanted to talk about abolition and particularly what that meant for educational leaders. As a faculty of educational leadership, we wanted the framework to be useful to the field. We wanted the framework, so we invited our community, our students and alumni to join us in a working group. We met twice in December and twice in January. During the December meetings, we read about abolition together. Together, we drafted a definition of abolition and identified some of the practices and principles of abolitionist teachers and leaders. We met in a smaller working group in January to combine the ideas into a framework for abolitionist leadership. In this three-part series, we invite you, our beloved community, into a conversation with our thought partners, experts in the field of abolition, to help deepen our collective understanding of abolitionism. We asked our thought partners to share a bit of their work and to provide feedback on the draft framework for abolitionist leadership. In a world where people own ideas and theories, we have intentionally disrupted this model with our collectivism. The framework for abolitionist leadership is a collective work between CSU East Bay students, alumni, staff, faculty, and our thought partners. It is intended to be both shaped and used by the field of educational leadership. Over the next 2 hours, our thought partners will share their work in abolition. We'll share the framework for abolitionist leadership with all of you. Then our thought partners will offer feedback on the draft framework. Next, we'll open up the floor for your questions and comments. We have 3 thought partners tonight. Dr. Crystal Laura is a former high school history teacher turned tenured full professor of educational leadership in Chicago. Dr. Laura's work has focused on the social foundations of education, diversity, and equity in schools, and building the capacity of urban educators to promote social justice with conviction, confidence, and great care. Dr. Laura's scholarship has been published in such peer-reviewed journals as Race, Ethnicity, and Education, Cultural Studies, Critical Methodologies, Urban Review, Gender and Education, Critical Questions in Education, in many collective volumes, and also in her 3 books, including the bestseller, Being Bad, My Baby Brother, and the School to Prison Pipeline. She is an international speaker, a critical professional development facilitator, and a frequent presenter at the annual meeting of the American Educational Research Association, within which she now serves as immediate past chair of the Equity and Inclusion Council. Dr. Laura is a gifted truth teller about the current context of urban education and the hopeful possibilities of how things can be otherwise. Dr. Farima Pour-Khorshid is a proud Bay Area educator, organizer, scholar. She taught at the elementary levels in her community for over a decade, as well as supported educators locally, nationally, and internationally through her roles as a university professor, teacher supervisor, educational consultant, and community organizer. She has 2 master's degrees and a PhD in education, and is now an assistant professor and teacher supervisor at the University of San Francisco. She is deeply committed to bridging abolition and healing-centered engagement within the field of education. Much of her work is rooted in her grassroots organizing within the Teachers for Social Justice organization, the Abolitionist Teaching Network, and the National Education for Liberation Network, which organizes Free Minds, Free People Conference. She is one of the editors, authors, and organizers collaborating on the upcoming book, Lessons in Liberation, an abolitionist toolkit for K-12 educators, which will be published through AK Press and released in the summer of 2021. This toolkit is a collaboration between the Education for Liberation, Critical Resistance, and several other grassroots abolitionist and justice-centered collectives. Dr. David Stovall is professor of Black Studies and Criminology, Law, and Justice at the University of Illinois at Chicago. His scholarship investigates 3 areas: critical race theory, the relationship between housing and education, and the intersection of race, place, and school. In the attempt to bring theory to action, he works with community organizations and schools to address issues of equity, justice, and abolishing the school-to-prison nexus. His work led him to become a member of the design team for the Greater Lawndale Little Village School for Social Justice, SOJO, which opened in the fall of 2005. Furthering his work with communities, students, and teachers, his work manifests itself in the involvement with the People's Education Movement, a collection of classroom teachers, community members, students, and university professors in Chicago, Los Angeles, and the San Francisco Bay Area, who engage in collaborative community projects centered in creating relevant curriculum. In addition to his duties and responsibilities as a professor at UIC, he also served as a volunteer social studies teacher at the Greater Lawndale Little Village School for Social Justice from 2005 to 2018. We are grateful to have you all on our panel today. And I'm going to turn to my colleague, Katie Strong, Dr. Katie Strom, to continue with today's session.
Thank you so much, Mari. Well, I'm so excited to be here, and I actually am just going to turn it over to Dr. Crystal Lara, who's going to get us started tonight. Each of our speakers will present for, well, the first two speakers will present for 15 minutes, and then Dr. Stovall will wrap us up, and then we'll move on to the dialogue portion. So Dr. Lara, you can take it away.
Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you, Mari, for those lovely and thoughtful introductions. Hi, everybody. Farima is so right. The chat is litty lit already, and we are only 20 minutes into the conversation. So I think it's going to be a really fun time. I see you. Hi, Emily. It's been too long. Hey there. Thank you. I appreciate that. David, I just want to point out really quickly, not you, Dave, from Chicago, but David, Louis, Muhammad, I just want you to know that I see you in the chat, and I'll circle back to you. I appreciate you early on at 7-Eleven reaching out. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. I'm gonna let you know right away that my plan is not really to give a talk right now. My plan is just to give you a sense of who I am very briefly. Although Mari just gave you an excellent introduction, I'm gonna give you just a quick sense of who I am, so that you have a sense of what sort of inspires the comments that I'll make later about abolitionist leadership and the reflections and feedback that I have on the framework. Let me see if I can grab the chat. It's very important to me that I see that, so hold on. Okay, cool. So, so I'm just going to use this brief time. We've been allotted 15 minutes each to say a little something. I'll probably use less of that so that I can give more of it to the conversation that we want to have together. So I just want to give you a little bit of a sense of who I am. So let me just begin with 3 truths. I want to make sure that I acknowledge, as always, the moment that we're in and the folks in the room. So I'm going to just guess that we are sort of landing on this quick spectrum, one of 3 of these places. Maybe you came into the room and you're like, you know what, finally, I can breathe a little bit. Post-January, I'm good. We're moving into February. I feel like I'm coming into this space okay. Maybe some of us, on the other hand, are a little bit worried. Maybe on the other hand, many of us are stressed out and wondering what in the world is going on. Can you just tell me in the chat, where do you land? Are you A, are you B, are you C? Are you somewhere in between? Are you all 3, depending on the moment? Just let me know how you're feeling as you're coming into the room this evening, and we're sharing this space together. Okay, cool. Yeah, A, since I'm here with y'all. Okay, Ariana, I see you. A and C and A and B, lots of A, Bs, some Cs. Okay. A, B, C, A, B, C. Okay, so this is helpful to just give all of us, particularly the presenters, a sense of where folks are in the room. So I appreciate you sharing that with me. And truth number 1 simply is that I hear you, and that any given moment in this talk alone, in this conversation with all of you over the next couple of hours, I will naturally navigate between all 3 of those. So just know ABs and especially ABCs that I see you and I hear you. I want to give a quick shout out to the parents in the room. If there is anybody who understands the grind of trying to do your thing while you also are doing your thing with 2 people upstairs or downstairs or wherever it is, please let me know in the chat. Any parents in the room right now who know about that quarantine life, pandemic, school, and parent and teach. 2 toddler boys. Hey, Aaron. Hey, Lydia. Hey, Sandra. Hey, Zoya. Hey, Britt. Hey, Elizabeth. Hey, Gloria. All of y'all, listen, I see you. Yes, distance learning is absolutely no joke. And so I just want you to know as I come into the room that I see you, family. Oh my goodness, look at us. Joya, single parent of a senior, bless your heart, 9/11/13. Okay, so we are in the building. Let me also acknowledge the moment that we're in for real, which is that right now, the coronavirus crisis is disproportionately endangering people of color. It is upending all of our lives. It is counting our coins. It is just reimagining all the things. We're also experiencing this overdue reckoning with anti-Black police violence. We're experiencing a heightened awareness of structural racism. We're experiencing this rapid shift to online learning, and many of us are teaching across digital divides, inequities, and deep challenges, both our own challenges and the challenges of the folks who we serve. So we just need to acknowledge as we show up and roll up in this space that this is the backdrop, not just of our personal and professional lives, but also of this conversation that we're going to engage in. So let me just begin with truth number 3, which is that if you are really deeply engaged in this moment that we are in, if you feel it in your soul that this is, work that we need to be navigating together, and that talking about abolitionist leadership is one way to move through it, just know that I feel you. So I see you, good people, I hear you, and also I feel you. And I'm grateful to be here with you. Hi there, I'm Dr. Crystal Laura. I'm a former high school history teacher from the west side of Chicago. Up until my husband became my barber, I used to have really long hair, but that's a whole sidebar. I'm a tenured professor of educational leadership here in Chicago. As you heard, a 3-time book author. I'm an international speaker. New Zealand was my absolute favorite place to be. I'm an unabashedly heart-centered, critical professional development facilitator. I am 50% Tupac and 50% Deepak, which means that if you know what I'm talking about, just let me know in the chat. You know how it feels to be a little bit hood and a little bit woo and still be 3000% scholarly. That's who you get tonight. Also, it's important for me to tell you that I'm a Capricorn. And that's not only important for me to tell you so that you understand that I'm a Capricorn, and that's really important. Also to let the Caps in the building know that I see you, but mostly I'm telling you that because January 6th was my birthday. Yeah, January 6th of all days was the day that kicked off my 38th twirl around the sun, one that nobody will ever forget. Thank you. Yes. So we know that this was the foolery that I was, sort of dealing with like everybody else on the day of my birth. So I'm saying that to say that I'm acutely aware of how important this moment is that we are sharing together. I'm incredibly appreciative of the space that you all are creating at CSU and that this working group is creating to make this conversation happen. But I'm an educator, and I'm going to just bring all the education, kind of quirks. And I'm going to ask you right now to write this down, that every crisis, and I just described like 1,000 of them, that every crisis creates opportunity, right? Lots of opportunities to do many things, but in this case, I want to highlight that every crisis creates an opportunity for us to pause, to reflect, to reimagine how we currently do things, how we did things, to make honest reflections about how we want things to be otherwise, and to get in community with folks to create new dreams, to create new structures, new policies, new practices, new ways of doing things. So this year has been incredibly painful for all of us. And I think that though we had a little something in mind around trauma-informed care, I think that it has just blown up all the opportunity for us to really think about trauma-informed care as a really intentional and holistic way to do what we do. But I just want to say that I think that for me, what Raw Goddess calls the sacred pause that we're in right now really is an opportunity for us to do the root work, right? To do the root work. And that for me means something really specific. It means that we ask really difficult questions that are not easily answered. They won't be answered in 2 hours. They won't be answered across a 4, panel series. But they're difficult questions and important questions for us to engage in anyway. And those include, what grounding principles are we committed to? And what policies and practices or processes are in or perhaps out of alignment with those commitments? And then we ought to be asking ourselves what is broken, what is poorly designed, or what is yet to be built. And then what knowledge, dispositions, and skills must we then begin to acquire in order to strengthen our root? Are y'all with me? Let me know in the chat. Are you with me here? Yes, okay, Elizabeth and Greg and Dr. Candace, hey, okay. So I firmly believe that I'm in good company, that I was invited here in part because I'm joining other folks who are organizing the right people to wrestle with the right questions at just the right time. So thank you for having me here. I was asked specifically to say something about my work, so let me just say something about that. Anybody seen this map before? This social change ecosystem map? I see you, sis, Farima. Deepa Iyer offers this really helpful, neat visual to map out the different roles that you either occupy or potentially are growing into. And I love it because I see myself all over the map. So, you know, I can give you all kinds of bios, right? But frankly, what I do and the shifts that I make are determined by the intervention that I feel called to make at any particular moment. So I could be a storyteller, right? I write, I like to chat. But I could also be a weaver and a guide and a healer as a certified yoga instructor and a vegan and a tree hugger and lots of other things, or a disruptor or a caregiver or a builder, right? But I just want to say that all of the projects that I'm going to draw on just in conversation with you are really focused on the roles that I've occupied as a builder, particularly as a bridge builder. I discovered that my superpower is making really complex shit simple. Easy, accessible, desirable. And so the writing, the speaking, the coaching, the teaching, the consulting, the circle building, the circle facilitation is really all about creating bridges to bring more people into the movement and make it more exciting and make it feel better and more pleasurable and more joyful. So, okay, that's all I want to say. Thank you for having me. I'm going to pass the mic to Sis. Let me stop share at some point.
So grateful for you, Crystal. I just want to share, it feels somewhat like a family reunion right now. What I will say is that my co-presenters with me this evening, both Crystal and Dave Stovall, have played such important roles in my own development and learning. When I was a grad student,